Hey, everybody, it's Mike, and I am joined today by Orlando of A Collector's Dream. One of the, so I'm starting this series of the best sports card collections on YouTube of normal people. Obviously, some people might say that Jeff Wilson has the best collection on YouTube. I'm never going to interview Jeff Wilson in all likelihood, but I want to talk to the regular people. So, Orlando, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Mike. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah, so I've watched a lot of your videos, and your collection is spectacular. How long have you been collecting?
I've been collecting over 50 years.
50
Yeah,
years. That's amazing. And how did you do you remember how you got started?
yeah, of course. I started in the late 60s, just buying packs of cards. I had some friends that were across the street, four boys, almost my age. One was a little bit older, others were a little bit younger, and they played Little League. And I would go to their house, and four boys. They had tons of cards, and I didn't have any, so I lived real close to the little drugstore, Budget Drugs, and that's where I first started buying cards. So um, I don't remember really too much in the 60s, but 1970 was the first year that I actually bought enough packs to build a set of cards. And, that's when I finally, for a few years there, I kind of left my cards. They were in my mom's house. My mom found them. And then when I got them back is when I saw exactly what I had, and I didn't really remember much of it. So I had some 68s and 69s, and then I had tons of cards from the 70s on. And lucky to have I had a Nolan Ryan rookie in there in part of my 68s. I may have only had like 100 cards, and one of them happened to be a Ryan rookie.
Well, that's lucky.
Yeah.
So where was this? I know you're in Southern Florida now, right?
In South Florida, I grew up in Miami.
Okay.
Came here when I was, from Cuba. I was 4 years old.
Four from Cuba. Okay. We're going to do a lightning round at the end. I'm sure you've seen my interviews. Lightning round is all about Cuban baseball players because I know that
Okay.
you are of Cuban descent or from Cuba
Mhm.
yourself, actually. Um, so first of all, where this is a series about the best, this isn't the best hair on YouTube, although you'd qualify for that
Oh,
series
come on.
too. The best collections on YouTube of sports cards. Who do you think I should be interviewing for this? Because I'll tell you who I have on my list right now. Dave Blue Jacket 66 has agreed to come on. I've been super busy and I haven't had a chance to interview anybody else, but Dave Blue Jacket 66 is coming on. I'd like to get Mangini on. Mike Moynihan has agreed to come on. And then Mike has given me another, I think it's Hall of Fame baseball autographs.
Yes.
So I'm trying to get some autograph people onto. Who else is out there that you think you look at their collection and say, man, that is an awesome collection?
I mean, those guys you mentioned right there. I mean, I think, in my opinion, Dave and Mangini probably have the two best collections that I've seen. I mean, I'm not talking Marshall Fogel type stuff, but
Sure.
those collections that are just very varied, very diverse. They have a little bit of everything. Dave's got a lot of, you know, not only nice cards, but high grade cards, where Mangini just has over $1 million worth of cards. He's got every every cards from every single set virtually, and I think
Yeah.
that's his goal, is to get a card from every set. Where I don't. I mean, um, I have a very diverse collection, but I'm very specific because I used to be a dealer many years ago, and I kind of look at somebody like Ryan from Breakout Cards, who also is building an awesome collection. And I really followed him because he was very much like me when I was younger. I was a part-time dealer, and kind of kept certain cards that talked to me, that I really liked very much, or rare stuff that I would find. But for the most part, it was a lot of I sold a lot of stuff in my life, so I don't have the volume that a Mike Moynihan has. I mean, he's got, I don't know, over 3,000 slabs, where I've whittled mine down to probably 300 slabs in total.
Oh, wow.
So my collection is not Huge. Well, a lot of my collection is still raw and graded, but my collection is not as big as many others. But I do have a lot of rare stuff and a lot of Hall of Fame autographs, baseball and football, and that's kind of my little niche is the Hall of Fame autographs, Perez Steele autographs, stuff like that.
Yeah, there have been a couple of times where I have done an Attic Find Friday video, and I've talked about a certain card that's like a pop two in history, and you'll comment, "Yeah, I bought that card from whatever auction house," and it blows my mind that I know through YouTube a guy who owns one of these cards that was sold for in an Attic Find Friday video, and those cards are so amazing. And I'm going to have you show some cards, not right now. I want people to
Hmm.
stick around and watch and hear some of your stories and some of the things that we go through here. But um, yeah, it's really cool. And Dave Blue Jacket 66 does the same thing in some ways where he has stories about the cards, where he knows the people who have bought them, or he'll correct me on things that I've gotten wrong in really interesting ways. And he's always worried that I'm going to get upset with him. I'm not I don't claim to be an expert. I love learning this stuff. So if I get something wrong, I'm glad when somebody says, "Hey, actually, this is the way it is." Um, so I'm thrilled to have you. You said that you have about 300 slabs. What is your preferred grading company, if you have one?
Um, well, initially it was PSA because many years ago, that's where I started with the registry. So I have just three sets on the registry right now, and I started with PSA, strictly with PSA. But for rarer cards, older cards, 1800s cards like that, SGC was still my choice. Non-registry stuff and vintage, real vintage stuff like pre-war. I like SGC, and today my favorite is SGC.
SGC seems to be the most consistent, and I'm just getting started in the PSA registry, but I do prefer SGC. Their slabs look better.
Yeah,
Their consistency is better. They know vintage, especially pre-war, better than PSA, but they don't have a registry, and it kills me.
right. Yeah, they tried a registry before, but it just bombed. So they supposedly they're going to come up with a registry. I heard Peter saying that he was going to do an app with the registry, but he's talked about that for years. Until I see it, I won't believe it.
Yeah, when I interviewed him in, I don't know, February or March, I tried getting him afterwards. We talked for like 45 minutes after the interview privately. And I'm not going to share anything that he said, but I tried to get the set registry out of him. Like, "You're going to come out with a set registry this year, right?" And he was so professional about it. He wasn't going to tell me anything. He just said, "I think you'll be really pleased with the things that SGC comes out with this year." And so I don't know. I hope that
We're
there's a
waiting. I
registry.
hope so too.
Yeah. Um, so you said that you specialize in Hall of Fame autographs. What's your best Hall of Fame autograph? I assume mostly baseball, but you do some football too, right?
Mostly baseball. I've got all of the celebration set. I'll show it
Hmm.
to you whenever you want. But I have the entire celebration set, and in that set, the toughest one is Chaco Conlon, who
Yeah.
died right about when that card came out. So that's probably my rarest one there. But I have autographs of pretty much everybody from Roy Campanella, which is a tough one. Of course, Ted Williams, Mickey Mantle, all those guys. I have all of those, and if I don't have them in my celebration set, I have them on some type of photo or something like that. I have Willie Mays and other guys that are not in there, but that celebration set has about 40 Hall of Famers, pretty much most of them, including Yaz and your favorite, of course,
My
and
guy, yes. I have
and
that
and
one.
pretty much, yeah, pretty much everybody. So I have those. I have autograph photos. I have autograph cards. Um, and for the football, that's been my longest and toughest passion. I have over 220 autograph Hall of Fame football players, and it's by Gary Thomas. And Gary Thomas is is the direct. It's a press deal of football,
Hmm.
and he does the postcards for the Football Hall of Fame. And they came out with a set of called Goal Line Art, and that came out. I think it was in somewhere in the '80s, and they finished producing them in 2016. So they produced about 300 Hall of Fame football players, and of course, some of them could not be signed because you have Jim Thorpe and players like that in
Yeah.
there. But for the most part, there's close to 240 possible signers, and I've got somewhere around 224 Hall
Wow.
of Fame football autographs.
That's amazing. It's going to be tough to beat your collection. Not that there's a real contest per se, but yeah,
It's not never a contest. Everybody, there's always someone that has more than you, and that's
yeah,
just the way it is. You got to collect what you like and collect what really, to me, it's what speaks to me. And
yeah.
and football, living in Florida, we never had a baseball team until recently in 2000. So it was a football town, and I lived 2 miles from the Orange Bowl. So I always went to the Dolphin games and kind of with some friends snuck in there. In those days, they would let you in after halftime, after the third quarter. And, was lucky enough to see just a lot of great games from the '72 undefeated Dolphin season
Wow.
to the University of Miami. And I was at the Doug Flutie game where Doug Flutie beat him at the end. And
Yeah,
I snuck in. I was right in the end zone there when Flutie got that pass, when he threw
wow.
that pass. So I
That's
was able to
awesome.
do a lot of that stuff. And I've got programs from the Dolphins from the '70s and autographed also by Bob Greasy and Don Shula and Paul Warfield and all that stuff that I personally got. When I was young, I was just a teenager back then.
Yeah, you're still young.
Thank you.
You do a lot of videos, not a lot, but you do some videos, great videos at local card shops that are in your area. What do you like in a card shop?
Well, I like to see variety in the card shops, not just the new stuff. And, unfortunately, my local card shop, the closest one to my house, has no vintage. It's just all mainly wax. And, I like to see combination of vintage, wax, a little bit of everything in the card shop, not just, new stuff. And that's pretty much all I find over here. So that's why I do a lot of the card shows. I love to go to the card shows and card shops and just to see what they have. And mostly what I enjoy is talking to the owners, talking, sports to them, talking cards to them, and just asking them how it's going, getting their opinions. And
Do you
I
call
just
them?
enjoy that.
Do you call them ahead of time? Because you always interview the owners. It seems
You
like you just pop in and say, "Can I interview for my channel?" That's the type of thing that makes me
uh,
nervous.
well, I'm really a shy person, but I was kind of forced to get into sales. And once I got into that, I just became more comfortable just walking into businesses. And I just go in there and talk to them a little bit. And, once I chat a little bit and tell them a little bit about me and stuff, then I ask permission if I can just shoot a video. And I go back outside, come in and do it. I don't edit. I don't even know how to edit. So all my videos are just straight. Here it goes, guys. It's a
That's amazing. They look
one
so
shot
good.
and that's it.
So you mentioned sales. You did 35 years of door-to-door sales. I read this in a comment
Yeah.
on Dustin's channel, maybe somewhere.
Yeah.
What were you selling?
I was selling advertising to businesses. It was door to door, going business to business. This was back in the early '80s, and it was basically just talking to the business owners and getting them to advertise. What we had in those days was a product that was a great product. My mentor, Mr. Mant, I have to give him credit for everything and my career in sales. And he had an idea of doing a small magazine mailed by neighborhoods to compete against the newspapers. So it was called in Florida, it was called the Flyer, and in California, it was called the Penny Saver. And pretty much what we did was we went into businesses and we asked them to run ads for their local neighborhood, kind of like what Google does now, where you do targeted.
Yeah.
In those days, you had to advertise in the newspaper that went to 2 counties or wherever. And if you're located in one end, you wasted most of your advertising somewhere else where people are not going to travel 30, 40, 50 miles to come to your small shop. So we did small local advertising, local editions of our magazine focused to what the customer needed. And, it wasn't really my goal to do that. I I'm a finance major in business administration. That's where I went to college for. And so basically financial advisor. I worked at a bank for 5 years.
Hmm.
And my job was what is essentially a data analyst today. But in those days, everything was done, on paper. So I was in charge of the analysis department for Southeast banks. And my job was to review the accounts to see if the bank was making a profit on those accounts, where we would look at accounts like Florida Power and Light and see, okay, what are we getting as far as, all the money they deposited, you make money on that, plus all the fees and all the things we're giving them, all these services, what's it costing the bank? So it was kind of a profit and loss for every account that the bank had. And it was my job to kind of run that and see, is that account profitable for the bank or not? And so that's kind of where I got into, because my dad was a banker all his life. So I got into the banking business. And for 5 years, I was stuck in a bank, analysis department board.
Ah,
And
man. Oh, that hurts.
I'm sorry, but you know what? And I'm making not that much money.
Yeah.
And my cousin said, hey, you got to check this out. And then my mentor, Mr. Matt, he was one of the originators of MasterCard back in
Hmm.
the day. And he also worked at Southeast Bank. And he had this idea and he went with it. And my cousin went to work with him and he says, come on, come work with us. So I went over there and I started working with that. And um, I don't even know how I got into sales, Mike, to be honest with you. I'm just really, really shy. But I'm a hard worker. So the first day, it's just my idea of sales was just go out there, give them a sales pitch, you know, and hope that they buy. So I was given the sales pitch and given the stuff, and I went out there the first day. It was crazy. I went out and I visited 75 businesses
Wow.
in one day. And I was given an area called Coral Gables, which was a high end place, similar to like let's say a Rodeo Drive.
Yeah.
So I'm here presenting this little paper magazine, which really is like it was a cheap little thing, to these high end stores. And well, it was a disaster. I was pretty much kicked out of every place except for a couple of them. And, I didn't give up. At the end, to make a long story short, one guy, a Cuban shoe shop owner, advertised with me about a couple of weeks after that. And this was an old man that had been in business for so many years. And just by talking to these business owners, I found out that, you know, the way to really sell them is to help them. If I could bring them business,
Hmm.
they would continue to give me money. So I changed my entire approach, and my approach was going in there, talking to them, not even talking about my product, asking them about their business and learning about their business and who are their customers and where do they come from and what do you sell and how do you sell it and how do you compare to your competition. So all those questions kind of led me to really look at my product through their eyes and say, okay, my idea is let's try this. This is where most of your customers live. Let's send them out.
Oh, Orlando, still there? I see you. Can't hear you. Not hearing you, Orlando. Can't hear you.
Sorry,
Oh,
I got a
there you are.
call in from. Got a call. I was getting a call from one of my YouTubers, Lou Rock.
Oh, Lou Rock, another
Yeah,
great
he's just
YouTuber.
calling me. Yeah. So I took a different approach and really never really went in trying to pitch my product. I
Yeah.
said, let me just listen and learn first. And I did that. And after a while, and after working my butt off, I became the number one salesman in the company, and I became the sales trainer, and I taught everybody kind of a different way of selling things, and that kind of changed my whole view of sales. Not pushing my product, not talking about my product, just trying to help people. And as time went on, and they got business, and they gave me more money to do more business, and so it was a good time, but it was tough. I had to turn down some business in those days. And, I'd come back to the office with my manager. I said, how'd you do today? And I said, well, I got this guy that gave me $1,000 and wants to advertise. And my manager said, great, let's run the ad. Let's run the ad. I said, no, 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 no. That's all he's got. So my plan was, I'm going to take his budget and do it $100 a week and build that business slowly. Because if I run an ad for $1,000 and the guy doesn't make that money back, he's going to cancel on me. But if I
Yeah.
run an ad for $100 and he gets one customer, hey, he's happy. He's kind of happy. At least he's getting something out of it.
Yeah.
So I took that approach, and that approach worked extremely well for me. And then it worked well for the company. And then they put in a system in place where, let's get customers on an advertising plan, an advertising program based on what they want to do. And at the end, I became the trainer and the teacher, and ended up being eventually vice president of the company
Wow. I
35
think
years
in
later.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think in sales, charisma goes a long way, and you're a very charismatic guy. So, and obviously thinking outside the
Thank you.
box and being smarter too. But yeah, it's a great story. I love hearing that stuff. And it's interesting because you mentioned data analytics and starting on pen and paper. I manage a team of data analysts and started as a data analyst in 2010 because I was really good in Microsoft Excel, and really nobody else in the company was, or very few people were. And so they said, here, we're going to put you as this data analyst. And I got really good. But then starting around like 2014, 15, these kids started graduating from college with their master's degrees in data analytics, which was new. There's no such thing when I graduated from college in 2001. And so I started looking around at all these people that were getting hired that had all these skills that I didn't have and couldn't unless went back to college for years. And that's when I started saying, time for me to get into management because it's cutthroat.
Yeah.
So I've been in management ever since then. So Orlando, you'll be at the National next week, right?
Yes, I will.
What are you looking for? What cards are you looking for?
Um, I'm not really looking for any real specific cards. I'm actually looking for a couple of cards for other YouTubers that have asked me to look for some cards for them, so I'll do
Nice.
that. But overall, really, I'm not looking. If I find something rare that I really would like to get, I'll pick that up. But really, I'm looking for some Cuban cards. Old Cuban cards, as old as I can find. If I find anything like a 1910 Punch Cigarros card, something like that, which is extremely rare, I'll get that. But overall, I'm not looking to spend too much money. I spent a lot of money on a big card this year, and usually I don't buy that much. If you look at my videos, I don't have a lot of purchases or a lot of big, purchases. So I'm not looking for anything big. I'm looking for still a few autographs for my football Hall of Fame autographs, some goal line art cards. I'm going to look for some of those. I have a list. There's about 20 more that I need, so I'm looking for some of those. But other than that, I'm just going to go really to have fun with the guys, to walk the floor, take some video, and just kind of see if I find anything rare. I'll try to pick it up. I am taking some cards to trade and sell.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to meeting you there for sure. You emailed me the Hannes Wagner restored card, and I'm going to do a video on that maybe in the next week to 10 days or so. What do you think about restored cards? Is that going to become a big trend like it is when, I don't know if it's a trend in comic books, but it's a thing. Do you see that taking off with sports cards?
Unfortunately, I do see that. And,
Yeah.
and I'm very worried about that because what happened, for example, in the comics, once they started, initially they started the expensive books, the high-end books were the ones that were being restored. Similar to what's happening today, there's now 2 Hannes Wagner cards that have been completely restored. And pretty much that's about it. There aren't too many others. But in comics, they started with the high end, and now even low-grade comic books are being restored. And I just don't like that. I like to see things in their original state. To me, I'm against it. I'm against any type of restoration, any type of cleaning, any type of. I like to see the card how it came out of the pack, and that's just my opinion. I think if a card is going to be restored, I think that needs to be clearly labeled. Maybe they put a different label or a different something on that saying this is not a real card. I guess I don't know what you want to call it.
That Wagner, I think it was PSA that graded it. It does say restored on the label, but I think
Right.
I don't know if PSA catches that. I haven't done enough research yet, or if you need to disclose that when you submit it. And my concern is that if you don't disclose it, will PSA know? Or are we going to see a lot of examples of people saying, hey, this is actually the same exact card that was a 2 years ago, and it's now a 6, and look at how much it's improved because it's been restored, and nobody's going to be able to tell that unless you have like Neo Cards and Comics does those great videos where he compares cards and says this is obviously the same exact card as this one. It's just been trimmed.
Yeah, you can tell. I mean, if a card has been altered or restored, a good grader will be able to tell. I mean, you look through the loop, and just by putting a black light on the cards, you'll see where all the restoration was done. So there's ways of telling. I don't think you're going to be able to get a restored card through grading nowadays. I mean, I'm sure there's some trim cards that sneak through and probably still going through. But for the most part, a card that's had some major work, restoration work, you'll be able to detect that. At least a good
So.
collector or a good grader will be able to detect that.
Yeah. Let's see some cards.
Sure.
What'd you bring to show for some cards?
Well, I wanted to show you. You asked me earlier what got me started.
Yeah.
And what got me started was this baseball right here. And this gentleman on this baseball right here, not Boog Powell, Orlando Pena.
Oh, yeah.
Boog Powell is also on there. This was my first autograph ball that I got. Of course, the autograph on the front there used to be Jim Palmer. He's disappeared.
He was all right.
But the one that is still on there that you can barely see is the Brooks Robinson.
Yeah, I recognize it.
Yeah, and then it's got a bunch of other guys on here. All of the basically it's the Baltimore Orioles team from the early 70s, and my grandfather took me to a spring training game here in Miami. He caught this ball, a foul ball. He knew Orlando Pena from Cuba. He was a Cuban player. My grandfather owned a supermarket, a couple supermarkets in Cuba, and he sponsored some local teams. And one of the local teams had Orlando Pena as the start pitcher, and he came to the United States and was a pitcher for the Orioles. So when we got the foul ball, my grandfather, after the game, took me down. And in those days, in spring training, you can go right down at the end of the game. You go right down to almost to the field there. So we went. He took me down there, took me in the dugout, called Orlando Pena over, signed my baseball, took me in the dugout. I was a kid back then. Took me in the dugout and introduced me to Brooks Robinson, Frank Robinson, Jim Palmer, Al Bumbry, Ellie Hendricks, Boog Powell, all the Orioles players. And I got their autograph on that ball. And it was that was what got me into collecting. I mean, truly what got me, meeting the players. And Brooks Robinson is still my favorite player. he talked to me the most. I'll never forget the conversation I had with him in the dugout. And then I met him years later, and he with my small son. And I told him I had met him, that day. He literally spent 10, 15 minutes talking to me, held up the autograph line. He got my son and sat him on his lap and talked to him and signed whatever I wanted there. In those days, it was like $5 an autograph and stuff. But and again, that those are the stories that really got me into baseball. And you see, the ball is all scuffed up because when I took that ball back to show all my friends, we had never seen a major league ball.
Yeah.
So we were throwing it around like kids, we just threw it in the street and we played with the ball, and it was just one of those fun things. And at the end of the day, some of the autographs kind of scuffed up and lost, but I kept the ball, thank God, and that's my earliest memory that got me into that. So
great story.
so I guess cards. I don't know where to start. I did want to show you something because, not only do I collect cards, but I collect unique stuff that, as an old salesman, some things that I see that I just enjoy are stuff like this. This is a salesman's sample of baseball uniforms from 1908.
Wow, that is amazing.
And this is the actual uniform sample that the salesman for the uniform companies in 1908 would literally go into the this is the biggest patch book you'll ever see. They would go into the with the owners and choose the different fabrics and colors for the uniform. So this is a sample book of all of the fabrics. These are all samples of fabrics from 1908 uniform. So you go in as a salesman, page to page, each one at different prices, depending on the different thickness of the material.
That is amazing.
So it's something I'd never seen before. And these are the kind of things I pick up whenever I see something like this. So I could just imagine back in 1908, the salesman going in there, and they would sell the bats and the balls and all of the different samples of stuff. See?
Oh, wow.
And it's a salesman sample of baseball uniform from 1908. So it has literally pieces of fabric from the uniforms of the 1908.
That's really cool.
Stuff like that is just, to me, unique, fascinating stuff that, that's the kind of stuff I have in my collection, that you may never see again, and that's kind of stuff. And and I collect a lot of unique stuff. Some of this I've shown before, like this postcard. It's from 1907, and it's Ty Cobb's rookie year, and so he's in here as a rookie, 1907. And what I really love about this postcard, I mean, it's you can see it's a 1.5, but I'm good with that because I like stuff that has history. And this, I've shown it on my video. This has history because this particular postcard was mailed from Detroit, and it's got the old 1907 thing. It was mailed from Detroit to New York from a lady called Idleland to Claire. And in there, they're talking about, a trip that her husband made. But at the end of it, it says here, Detroit is baseball mad. So it has, I don't know if you can read that. It says Detroit, she's telling Claire, she's telling Detroit it's baseball mad. And it's baseball mad because they had Ty Cobb, Sam Crawford, Huey Jennings was the manager, a lot of Hall of Famers. And they, from 1907 to 1910, the Tigers went to the World Series. Of course, they were beaten by Honus Wagner, but it's just, to me, a piece of history that this card went from Detroit to New York, and the lady wrote in the back how happy, they said mad in those days, but it's how crazy Detroit was was because the team was doing so well and they had just gotten Tykov. So
That's awesome.
that kind of stuff to me is just like awesome pieces that are just history. You know, I could get a higher grade on a postcard, but that postcard, you know, it's just to me a piece of history.
Yeah.
And it talks about how times were back in the 1900s and how excited the people were back in those days. So
Yeah.
those are stuff that really, that's the kind of unique stuff that I like to collect, and, those type of things. I told you I was a dealer back in the day. I went out and just for you, I found my old business card.
Oh, look at that.
Oops. Let me get my name out of there. My old business card.
I'll edit it out for you.
Nah, it's okay. That number is so old anyway. My old business card from 1980s. That number doesn't exist. And then this is my new.
Oh yeah,
my new
I have
one.
that.
Using the same, using the same name, same thing.
Yeah,
So
that's
I
awesome.
sent you one. Yeah. So I used to do card shows and stuff, and I'm a guy that likes. I keep my stuff. I don't throw too much away. I'm not really a hoarder because I've sold most of my collection. I've kind of sold, but I do keep certain things that mean to me. The person that I used to do all the card shows with was a really good friend of mine. He passed away recently, and that's Rich Altman.
Oh
And
yeah.
I did all his shows here in Florida. Rich Altman was just an incredible guy, and just a lot of people called him grumpy. He wasn't the nicest guy, but once you got to know him, he was great. So he was really one of the promoters. I did all of his shows in Florida, and I got to meet so many people. And what really got me into the pre-war and stuff were, when I met Mr. Mint, Alan Rosen, and another gentleman that I met back in the day that really inspired me was, I'll show you his card too, was this guy here, Alan Hager. I'm sure he passed away also. Alan Hager was one of the first guys that actually started grading cards, not really grading, but putting cards in holders back in those days. I think it was called Accu Card or something. Accu Card it was called.
Yeah.
So I was able to meet dealers like that, talk to them, get to know them, and really learn about the history of cards and the history of the sport. And that's kind of what I love the most about it, is just history. Cards, I mean, I could start showing cards from some of my favorite cards when I really, at first, when I became a dealer in the beginning, of course it was in the early 80s, and that's when you had, this was the card. Everybody wanted this card, and this was it, along with this Canseco card.
Yeah, I have that card autographed too.
Yeah, I got this card autograph when this on his rookie year. He lived in Miami. He was from Miami. He went to high school here, so I got his autograph back in the day and got to meet him. That was also a thrill.
Great Cuban baseball player.
Could have been a Hall of Famer if he wouldn't have hit the juice. And the guy, him and his brother were both big guys. I mean, they were huge guys. They didn't need to do that. They didn't need to go, and just like Barry Bonds, he never needed to do that. He was going to be a Hall of Famer, Roger Clemens, and so on.
Yeah.
But, everybody makes mistakes.
Agreed.
So that's kind of how I started in it, and I was a Yankees fan, like many people were. There was no real team in where I lived, so the Yankees were my team, and Mantle was my guy. I remember Mantle at the end of his career when I was a kid, and he was retiring, and so I was a Mantle collector. And the
What's
first
your
thing
best Mantle card?
Well, you know what my best Mantle card. I'll pull it out. There's my best Mantle card, and there's my favorite Mantle card.
Yep.
And that's a difference.
There is, because, for sure.
Yeah, of course, my best Mantle card. One of my goals was to do the Mantle run, so I finally did the Mantle run. So of course, my best Mantle run, my best Mantle is this Mantle.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one.
It's the best one that I've scene that I could ever afford.
It's so
And
nicely
that's
centered.
because
It's so good.
it is beautiful, and it is not altered because it was an attic find. And to me, it's a beauty. It's
Tell me more. What do you mean it's not altered?
this card was found in an attic find of a gentleman that passed away in in a wooden box with his toys. There were about a little over 80 cards wrapped in twine in that little box, and they were all 52 high number cards. And when they were found, they were graded, and some of the cards were minimum size, and the
Hmm.
mantle was one of them that was minimum size. But I know that the person, I got it from the family of the man who pulled it from the pack. The person that actually found it was the cousin of one of the owners of the auction house, and he called his cousin, the auction house guy, and I don't want to mention names. I've done it in my other videos, but so I spoke to him when I read about this find, and I ended up, he took it to get it graded. PSA graded it authentic, altered. Then he took it to SGC, and SGC said that it's not altered, it's a minimum grade. So that's the SGC label. He was going
Fascinating.
to transfer it over to SGC, but because of for selling purposes, the auction guy said, that he told me, I don't want to switch it over because a lot of people collect the PSA registry, and I'll get more money on it through PSA than having it
Yeah.
as an SGC minimum.
Yeah.
So to me, it was great because it said altered, and that scared a lot of people away from it.
It's a
But
beauty.
since I knew about it, I talked to the guy. So basically, I'm other than the owner's family and the auction house, it's come to me, and I have a
Yeah.
letter from him stating the whole story, what happened when he went to the house, and he told me the whole story. I actually met him at the National last year, and we talked about it. He told me the whole story of when he went into the house, and they thought that it was $1 million card, and he thought it was $1 million card, and then PSA deemed it altered, and then SGC deemed it not altered, but just minimum size.
Wow. I love those stories. Makes the cards so much
I,
better, doesn't it?
to me, it's a card I'll never sell. Not just because it's my dream card, but it's because the story behind it. You know, I could have another. I was gonna, I had chances to get other 52 manos, but I could never afford anything more than maybe a two. You know, even back in those days.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting lucky enough to find that one. For the price of about a two.
Wow.
So
That's awesome.
actually a price of a one, so I got lucky. But my favorite is this one here.
Yeah.
That is my favorite mantle.
It's a 6. 53 and a
Yeah,
6.
I got this. The reason it's my favorite mantle is not just because I just love the image,
Yeah.
but I picked this up raw back years ago from another dealer at one of the card shows, and this was my first big mantle purchase. It was like the most money I had spent on a mantle back in those days. And so it was really like, this was my mantle grail, for so many years until I finally picked up my 52 mantle. Even though I do have the 51 Bowman also, but this was my first big mantle, so it's still my favorite mantle.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So
What
I
else
I
do you want to
did
show?
complete I completed the mantle run and stuff. And my 51 Bowman mantle, I've shown that too.
Yeah.
That I got in a big collection that I purchased because I used to run ads in my little magazine saying wanting to buy cards. And of course, the biggest section of that magazine was the garage sale section. So I went to a lot of garage sales back then and picked up a lot of cards and, sold a lot of cards. I guess that one other favorite, of course, mantle is I love the red heart cards.
Oh yeah.
So that's another one of my mantles that I picked up. And you'll see all of these are old labels because I got them graded many, many years ago, and they were all raw in those days. So I did that to get, my mantle run. So I have,
Yeah.
you know, mantle was my guy. My goal was to complete the mantle run. So I completed the mantle run. And then after that, I really got into deeper into pre-war. And my first big, by the way, this was another one of the cards from that
Yeah.
find.
Oh
That
yeah.
was graded authentic, and it was graded but you can see how sharp these cards were, brand new. I mean, they just right out of the pack. The family said that they didn't know that their grandfather even collected cards until they found these cards in the box in the attic.
The centering and the
So
color is just so good.
they were like right out of the pack, and I wish I could have bought more of those, but I just couldn't afford. I mean,
Yeah.
the Jackie Robinson, I think, graded a 6. The um, the uh, the Eddie Matthews graded a 6.5.
Wow.
And there was a lot of other ones that graded, but the ones with grades sold pretty high, so I just couldn't afford those. I wish I could have, but I got the two. I got the Mantle, which was the best in the group.
Yeah.
I spent all my money and had to sell some stuff. I mean, I ended up selling. I had a complete 53 Bowman set, and I ended up selling that.
Wow.
I did keep the Mantle from that set, but you know, you got to sometimes you got to move on. That's why I like, people like Ryan from Breakout and even Sammy Thunder and those guys like that go out there and they're hustling and they buy a card and they sell it, but they upgrade, and that's kind of what
Yeah.
I did over the years. This is not something a lot of people look at my collections as, wow, look at that. Well, it's 50 years, guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm telling you, 20 years from now, Ryan from Breakout's gonna have a better collection than me. Buying, selling, collect, keep certain stuff here and there, and then move on. And so, what took me way, way back was this card here.
Yeah.
That was my first pre-50s card that I bought, and again, I bought it raw. This I got at a local card shop back in Brandon, Florida, back in those days. And this card took me back to the 49 leaf, and it says 48, but they're
Yeah.
49 leaf. I was fascinated with this set. I'm telling you, Mike, I just fell in love with the set. I started trying to build the set. I never did get the Jackie. I never got the Satchel. I picked up a few other guys. Eventually I ended up selling those. And I got into the 49 leaf premiums,
Yep.
which I thought were so rare. I'd never seen them, and I was lucky enough to pick up a bunch of those, and I started collecting that set. And the more and more I looked into it, I just decided I'm going to focus on that set.
Yeah.
So
So the 49 leaf premiums were, I
yeah,
think, one of the ones that came from an attic find, right? And you bought it from an auction house out of an attic find. Who was that?
no, those came from a card show. I was in line at a card show in the early 80s or mid 80s, and there was a gentleman there that was about my age, that his grandfather or father, his father had passed away, and he had a box full of 49 leaf cards and about 12 of the premiums.
Hmm.
And, you know, I, boy, I wanted to buy that off of him. But, we were talking in line waiting for the card show to open, and I told him, listen, he didn't really know anything about it. I told him, what you have here is gold. You have a lot of great stuff in here, you know. And I told him what it was. I explained to him and stuff because he wasn't really sure. And I told him, I said, um, your best bet. I didn't have enough money to even make him an offer on that at that point. So I told him, just go into the show, look for the vintage dealers. I pointed him out to a couple of dealers to go see, and he went into the show. And I told him before, I said, whatever you don't sell at the end of the show, please see me, and I'll make arrangements. I'll buy whatever you didn't sell, I'll buy it off of you. Well, at the end of the show, it ended up that he sold all the cards. When he went down, all of a sudden I'm seeing all these dealers gather around in one place, and they were gathering around this guy. And at the end of the show, he comes to me and says, I sold them all and I made a lot of money. Thank you for telling me, because I would have sold them for a lot cheaper and you helped me out and all that stuff. And he says the only thing I didn't sell were these posters, the premiums.
Right. Yeah.
And I said, well, I'll buy them off you. And he had no idea what they were worth, and he was going to give them to me super cheap, but I think I offered him $300 for the whole thing. There were 12 posters, and at that time, there's kind of nobody knew much about them. I kind of had an idea what they were worth, so I gave a pretty fair price back there, believe it or not. And to make a long story short, I didn't have the money, so I had to meet with him the next day, and I met with him at a Denny's the next day, and he says, "Listen, you offered me 300. I'll give them to you for $250 because you helped me out with the rest of them." So I got
nice.
that, and then and I ended up taking some to the National, at 1992 National in Atlanta, and I sold some of them there, and I picked up a couple that I needed and to complete my set at that time, and slowly I upgraded the set, and currently it's #1 on the PSA registry. And what I like about that set is it came in the boxes of the packs of 49 leaf cards. On the bottom of the box, there was one poster, one premium, and the person who bought the last packs in the box got the premium. So it was one per box, so it's very rare.
Yeah.
And I actually, in the National, I'm going to meet a gentleman that literally pulled them out of the packs, bought packs in 49, has a diary of it, which I did a little video on it. And he has a diary saying, I bought the last pack and the store owner gave me this premium or this picture of Babe Ruth, and that was in April of 1949.
Wow.
And he has a great diary of what he did, when he mailed it in. He mailed in the wrappers also to get back the book where you put the cards in and all that stuff. So great story. It was one of my subscribers that said, hey, my dad did this. And I talked to him. We've been emailing back and forth, and we agreed to meet at the National. I helped him out, and he got his premiums graded about a couple of months ago. Sent me the pictures and stuff, and that's
awesome.
Fun stuff. And I love to hear the history of somebody that literally pulled packs and opened the packs.
Yeah. I was only pulling like 1987 Topps packs.
Yeah, I mean, 1970 was my first set. I built that set. I was a set builder.
Yeah.
Mike, what I did all my years for the first, 20, 30 years of my collecting was building sets. And, I had all the 70 sets. So I went back and built almost every set from the 60s, almost every set from the 50s. I mean, I had a 53 Bowman set, a 54 Bowman set. I had almost a complete 51 set. I had a bunch of 52s. I had almost a complete 53 set. Oh God, what else did I have? 57, 58, and 59 complete sets and all that. So, but as a part-time dealer, you can't really fall in love with everything. So, I ended up breaking up the sets to really get stuff that I really wanted. So I got deeper into the older stuff, and then I got into the 34s, 33 Gaudis.
Yeah.
I almost completed this set. This was another one of those raw cards that I bought, and even though it's a 1, and I could have probably upgraded it, to me, it's a card that I've had for so long that it means more to me in this 1 grade, that if I would sell it and get like a 4, yeah, it's awesome, but it doesn't have any meaning. It's just, I just bought that. This one, I know where I got it from another dealer, that the collector brought it in and sold it to him, and I bought it from him raw, and I got it graded. So to me, those type of things have meaning to me. Some of those cards may not be my most valuable, but they're the ones that I remember. I remember the history, and and those type of things. So eventually, I went back pre-war, and I began to really, because of people like Alan Hager and stuff like that, I got into really the rare stuff. Probably maybe 25 years ago, 25 years ago, I got into that, and just started slowly, and I fell in love with the Goodwin Champion set, the 1888 Goodwin Champions. It just became, once I completed my mantles and my 49 leaf premium, I just went back way pre-war, and it's just these Goodwin Champion cards, just
Yeah.
they became my passion. I
That's
picked up
amazing.
the favorite card of my collection. It's still my favorite card is the King Kelly.
Yep.
And
Those cards are 135 years old. Look at how good they look.
135 years old, and that's
Look at the
what I
color.
fell in love with, was the color. And I was in the printing business, so these were the first chromolithograph cards, which is what today you call chrome, which is the
Yeah.
printing process of chrome. But these were the first ones that were in those days. And what was so interesting is that all of these were literally handmade cards. They didn't have real printing presses and you roll the presses back then. They were literally carved on limestone blocks, and each color had to have a different carving. And these limestone blocks were really, really sanded down, really fine, and they carved in those, and each color had to be placed on there. And just by it, to me, it's just like a miracle how these cards, not only were they made, but how they survived.
Yeah.
And Goodwin, Goodwin, Mr. Goodwin was the one that started, the 1887 cards. These are, you could see Goodwin and Champion. Goodwin's in the bottom, but this was the number one tobacco company back in those days. They put out the Old Judge cigarettes,
Yep.
which is what these cards say on the bottom in there, Old Judge cigarettes.
Yep.
So Mr. Goodwin, once he was producing those, Allen and Ginter came in, and they came up. They started with the chromolitho process, first doing the color cards, because most of these cards, if they're literally pictures that were pasted on there. That's what they actually are. And so Mr. Goodwin came up with these. Allen Ginter came up with the cards first in 1887, but they were mostly white background with a little color picture of the player in the front. And I've got one there somewhere. I'll pull it. But anyway, Goodwin decided, no, I'm going to one up this guy, kind of like Thompson Bowman. I'm going to one up this guy, and I'm going to come up with a full color card. And he called them the Goodwin Champions. And he picked the best 50 players from all the sports, from baseball. The first football card, which I just showed you, came in that set. They had the boxers, they had the wrestlers, they had the oarsmen, and they had the first tennis cards came out there, and all the different sports, the world's strongest man, plus personalities like Buffalo Bill, when he was still shooting, playing days, Buffalo Bill's card. So I just that set just was history of sport is what I saw it. And I really, I looked it up, and they were pretty rare. If you look at them, they didn't produce that many. They were also inserted at the same time, the Old Judge cigarettes, at the same time they were doing the 1888 Old Judges. So some packs would have the champions and some would have the Old Judge cards in there. And those would come out with a little coupon that were in the cigarettes.
Oh, wow.
That were with the card. This was the coupon that were in the card. It was like a redemption. And what you would do is this came in between the cigarette and the card. And it says on there that you can redeem it for, it expires in July of 1889. And you could redeem it for, you redeem these for cabinet photos of the players in those days. So when you see the old judge cabinets, which are similar to the old judge cards, they came because of these redemptions. And you could also redeem them for albums. So,
Wow.
and these are actually very rare. You don't see these. I
Piece of
think,
history.
yeah, at one time I had about 3 of these. I still got a couple of them. And I think PSA maybe is graded 10 in total because it's a paper, it's a little thin paper,
Yeah.
and people would redeem it. And you had to redeem it. You would either get an album where you could get the album of the like the Allen and Ginter's album, not the Allen, the Goodwin Champions baseball album, or the Goodwin Champions Champions album, or different types of albums. They had a round album that they made, which is pretty rare, and those were redeemed with these little coupons that came in there. So, it's just kind of little things like that that I like to collect because it kind of all ties my collection together, you know.
Yeah.
And so that's just kind of stuff. So I really got into the 1800s, and then I'm a football fan and I'm a baseball fan. So when I studied the football, I found this.
Ah, yes.
Your buddy, Mr.
I,
Anonymous,
yep.
with
I just did
with
that Attic
with
Find Friday a few weeks ago.
with the ink on top. It was somebody put a black marker on the top of this, and that's why it's altered. Somebody put a black marker on there, if you can see it, and it has a crease. But the picture on this card is incredible, and this was the rarest football card ever made. And some say this is the Honus Wagner of football.
Right. John
Because
Dunlop of Harvard.
John Dunlop. And they didn't discover until the 80s who John Dunlop was.
Yeah.
And these came in Mayo Cup plug, chewing tobacco and loose chewing tobacco. And as you can see here, here is the year after that. Here's the Cap Anson. You see how, let me see if I can show this. See how the name, can you see the name? It says Anson.
Yep.
First base. Also Mayo Cup plug.
Yeah.
So the Anson, yeah. So this card, they pulled it off the production line. That's the story that I've been able to find, because they had forgotten to put the name of the player on here.
Mm-hmm. And the team, because the other ones had.
And the team, the team
school.
and the player, and everything is gone. There's not. Yeah. They didn't print anything on there, so nobody really knew who he was. And he was actually one of the top players in the day, but
he was a freshman though, right? This was 1894. He was a freshman at the time. Yeah.
He was a freshman at the time. Yeah. Yeah. So, and that team, those teams back then were coached by Walter Camp, the person that basically wrote the book on football, just like they say Abner Doubleday or Harry Wright, whoever discovered or wrote the book. But I guess both of them were involved in that stuff, the Wright brothers, but the other Wright brothers, Harry and his brother from baseball. So they were the ones who really started baseball, and Walter Camp was the one who started football. So I'm lucky to have that card. That's a card that I knew was available many years ago. I never ever thought I would ever even find the card or ever even get that card. And when I saw that for sale, I had to go all out and get it,
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. What other favorites do you have to show us?
Some other favorites. Let's see. My Cuban card collection.
Oh, yeah.
The first Cuban cards made were 1909. So this is technically a tobacco card from Cuba, the Cuban cabanas. And these cards are actually smaller than the actual tobacco cards. So let me show you. Here's a tobacco card. There's a Trispeaker.
So sorry,
And
that Esteban card was produced in Cuba, you said, right?
They were made in Cuba, and they were made in 1909.
I noticed that it has Cabañas, so it has the Nye, whereas Tops, when Minnie Minoso was young, did not have the Nye, so everybody calls him Minnie Minoso, right? Shouldn't it be
Exactly.
Minoso?
Yeah, it's Minoso.
Yeah.
But of course, they're not going to put that on there. But
nice autograph. Wow, I
that's
love how
my
he signed that
beautiful
card. Yeah,
I love that card. That's my favorite Minoso card. He signed it right on the back there. And yeah, it's Minoso, but of course it doesn't. It's not going to show that.
right.
Every time I talk to
Tops
my
didn't know about the Nye in the 1950s.
No,
and
every
60s.
time I talk to my mom always corrects me, because I say Minoso because everybody's always said that. But my mom always said, "Oh, Minoso, Minoso." I'm like, yeah, you're right, Mom, you're right. So, but the story on these was that in 1909, the Detroit Tigers champion team, went to play in Cuba, and it was such a big deal that they made a set in Cuba that included the Detroit Tigers team that went to play there. Now, Ty Cobb did not go there, but there are other Detroit Tigers players, and the Detroit Tigers cards have a black border, not a blue border. And then this is the Almendares team, and the other ones were the Havana team, and the Havana team has the red border. So you have the red versions, the blue versions, and then the black ones, which are the Detroit Tigers players. And that was the first set that was actually made in Cuba. And then after that, in 1910, they produced some cards, and all the way through through the 40s. And these are some of the cards back from the 40s. These are the Caramelo Deportivos. These are all made in Cuba. And
wow.
again, some of these were American players. This is an American player. This is Dick Sisler.
Huh.
So they do have a lot of those, even back in the 40s, because people don't realize that baseball has been around in Cuba for over 100 years. I did a little video about it, but back in the 1870s, 1879, I think it was, there were two brothers that went to school in New Orleans, and they played baseball in New Orleans, and they literally brought to Cuba the bat, the ball, and some whatever equipment they had back in those days. They brought it back to Cuba, and that's how the Cubans started. Back in about 1880, they started playing. So it's really, really interesting how Cuba started with baseball, but it's the national game. They've been playing it almost as long as here in the United States, and it was started by two Cuban university students that went back to Cuba and showed the game in Cuba. And these are some more Cuban cards here. These are the Propaganda Montiel. Yeah, I got this because it had my name, Orlando, on it.
Yeah.
But you have the Mini Minosos and all those cards. Some of these even have the Stan Musial rookie card is in there from 1946, before they made a card of them in the United States and stuff like that.
Oh, I'm not aware of that one. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty neat stuff. Cuba's got a long history. So, and I showed the Trispeaker because, I just, I like the T206 cards, but I really like the backs. And my favorite is the polar bear backs.
Yeah.
And I like the polar bear back because it was in the tobacco tin, in the actual tobacco tins. And I just kind of, I don't know, I just like that kind of history. That's not just, it wasn't really in the packs, it was in the tobacco tin in that case, that instance.
Yeah, I showed this a few months back, but
Oh,
that's
I
the
love that.
Piedmont
Yeah.
pack. I just actually got an offer, and I've got the T206 in there too, but just got an offer on Instagram. Somebody watched the video and then private messaged me on Instagram offering me $400 just for the pack. And I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
that'd be a huge profit for me, but I like having it. So I said, no, thank you.
I don't blame you. That's the kind of stuff I would keep. You don't see too many of those. I mean, you'll
Right.
find it at the National and stuff, but
Sure.
for the most part, it's getting rarer and rarer because most people like you are going to keep it in their collection
Yep.
and not sell it. So
Yep.
that's super nice. I love that.
Yeah. Thanks. Any others?
So I don't know what else. I like some of the rare issues that you don't see too much. These are the Bryce Williams. I don't know if you ever seen these.
I
These are
don't know what.
1902, 1903 E107, 1903
Oh yeah.
E107s.
Yeah.
And this set has extremely rare issues of Hannes Wagner and Christy
Mm.
Mathewson and you know, a lot of the big name players before the T206. This was really kind of the first 1900s tobacco cards, and they're blank backs.
Yeah.
Uh, but they're photos of the players. That's what I like. I mean, I like cards like that literally have the pictures of the players. I don't like some of those strip cards that they have, like, cartoony Babe
Right.
Ruth and stuff like that. It just
Yeah.
doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't
I'm with
excite
you.
me as far as looking at a card with an actual picture of the player.
Or a
So
nice
I just
art.
enjoy that, or a nice artwork, or something that's really going to
Yeah.
catch your attention. I mean, yeah, I love like artwork like the 50 Bowmans. I
Yep.
love these cards because just the artwork on those are beautiful.
That's one that I want. The
So
50 Ted
yeah,
Williams. 48,
uh,
49 is
yeah,
that's my most attainable grail card.
yeah. And the 51 is nice too. It's the same image, just a little bit bigger
Bigger.
card, so
Yeah.
that's nice too. So, I got back into trying to collect the pre-war and some Babe Ruth cards. I'll show you some of the Babe Ruth cards that I like, that I have.
You've been holding out on me.
Well,
You've been
look,
holding out the
there's a
Babe
lot.
Ruths.
There's a lot of Babe Ruth collectors out there. Other guys, you've asked me who else. I mean, Rick Vintage Oddball Cards.
Yeah.
He's another guy that has great collections. There's so many of them out there that have collections. They may not have some of the cards I have, but they have a lot of better cards, or they have more volume, many other cards than I do.
Yeah.
So because look, I'm in my late 60s. I'm kind of getting to a point where, in the last virtually 10, 15 years, I've kind of narrowed my focus, sold stuff off that I really didn't love to get stuff that I really love, and that's
Yeah.
kind of I'm still doing that, and so this is one of my favorites. This is the 1928 Harringtons,
Yeah.
Babe Ruth. And what I
3.5.
like
That's a
about this is this
95-year-old card. Amazing.
95-year-old card. And this was given out to kids when they would buy ice cream at the Harringtons. There's three different versions of it. There's Harringtons, there's Tharps, and Euglings ice cream. And what I love about this one, and I'm going to read it to you, I don't know, it says, save these pictures. And then it says that if you get because they didn't call them cards, they called them pictures back then.
Yeah.
So it says, save these pictures. And if you get the Babe Ruth picture, you could turn it in and get a free ice cream. So if you got this card, you turned it in and got free ice cream. So I'm sure that the non-baseball fans turned them back in. So if you look
I
at the pop report on this, there's less than 50 or somewhere around 50 total of this card.
I love ice cream more than almost anything, but I would hang on to the Babe Ruth.
And let me tell you why I really love this card, this particular card. Can you see the ice cream? Can you see that big?
Yeah. Yes.
It is literally a fingerprint. I don't know if you can see, but it is the fingerprint. I'm assuming some kid had
Yeah.
ice cream on his finger,
Yeah.
put it there to hold the card,
Yeah.
and the fingerprint is there with like a stain, but I looked at it, it's somebody's part of a fingerprint.
It's great.
So to me, it's just this kid had this card and touched it with the ice cream. So I actually think the stain adds to
Yeah.
the thing. So it's a
Absolutely.
3.5, nicely centered, real tough card to find, especially with the with ice cream stain in the back. And it says back here, listen to this, Mike. It says, also, 1 gallon of Harrington's ice cream will be delivered free to the holder of a complete set of the 60 different baseball stars upon surrender of the same to any Harrington dealer.
Wow.
So if you had the whole set, they would deliver a gallon of ice cream to your house. Now remember, this is the 1928.
Yeah.
They had to deliver these ice cream in literally an ice truck.
Yeah.
Back then, a lot of people didn't even have refrigerators. I mean, you're talking 1928. It's pretty way back there in those days. So I'm just imagining some people would have said, hey, wow, a gallon of ice cream, that's, you know. So that's kind of neat. I love that kind of stuff. And then
Yeah.
some of my other Babe Ruth, if you really want to see some good Babe Ruth, there's Jay Stoudemire.
Yeah.
Josh has an incredible Babe Ruth collection also.
Okay.
This is one of my favorites, and that's the montage American Caramel. This is a 1922 American Caramel E121. And what I like about this one, and it has the field. So it has him batting here with the field, and then it has him standing, and then it has the portrait version of it.
Wow.
So, and these were also, you can see the back, American Caramel
Yep.
Company. So that's another one of the Babe Ruth. And then my favorite Babe Ruth of all is is the E120 American Caramel, which is this Ruth here.
I did a video on
And
this.
I did a video on this Ruth because Mangini said this was his dream card.
You had to taunt him.
I wasn't taunting, but I just felt like, I had to show it. And, Mangini's become a really good friend of mine. I can't wait to go one day to his house and see his collection.
Yeah.
He's got a museum. He literally has, I'm telling you, Mike, I guess if I had to rate the top collections, it would be between Mangini and Dave. I think Mangini's got some more older stuff, but Dave's got some of those oddball things that you'll never see. He's got stuff that I would love to have, the dandy mantle and stuff like that, all the hot dog cards that he has, and really rare. But again, and this one,
He's
what
got
I
the
like
Cracker
about
Jack
this,
Joe Jackson too, I think, right?
yes, he's got God, what a story on that Cracker Jack Joe
Yeah.
Jackson.
Yeah.
His girlfriend tore it up.
Yes.
And he actually, that's a restored card.
Yeah.
But it does say it was restored, and it was just actually restored in half. I remember he texted me. Well, he group texted a lot of people saying, "This is my card. Don't bid on it. I want it." So nobody. I mean, you want to make sure nobody was going to bid on it. And when he got it, he texted me and showed it to me, and don't say anything until I do the video. But I can't wait to meet Dave. I've never met him in person, and I'm going to give him a hug when I see him. But I love this card because it's got in the back the whole Yankees lineup.
Yeah.
Usually you don't see that on the back of a card. And it's got at first base, Wally Pipp.
Yeah. Classic.
So just, so that's kind of, I don't know. What how about some football? Let me I talked about my goal line art football. autograph collection. I'll pull up a few of these that I have. This is what the goal line art cards are.
Oh yeah, those look really good.
Very similar to the press steel.
Yep.
But they're football, and they're Hall of Fame. You know, they were given out by the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and they're limited amount. You know, it's the same thing as press steel. There were 5,000 total that were printed, and you know, you get them signed. So that's my Walter
cool.
Payton autograph.
Yeah.
I've got all the big guys here. That's my Jim Brown autograph.
It's pretty good.
And of course, Gale Sayers.
Yeah.
And I mean, tons of them. I mean, one of the rarest ones, and one of my favorites because I played his game is Madden.
Yeah.
So I've got the John Madden autograph.
That's a great looking autograph on that card.
Yeah, that's a beauty. And those are really tough. So in the back, it tells you when they were in the class of 2006.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I've got, you know, Unitas and Bart Starr and Autogram. I mean, I could show you all of them here. And Joe Montana and Joe Namath and
Orlando bringing the big guns to the best collection on
Harv
YouTube.
even. Harv, my favorite, Marino.
Wow.
Namath. Elway. Kelly. I mean, I got, you know, I can go on and on and on. I've got tons of them. I've got 220 of these.
Yeah.
You know, from managers. My here's OJ.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to show you some of those things. So that's one of the things I'm going to do at the National. Try to kind of finish up some of the guys that I have. The problem is that some of these guys right now, they're one of the ones that, you know, people that I need are a lot of the modern guys. Like, for example, Michael Strahan. Hell, Michael Strahan wants like $200-300 for an autograph. I'm not paying that. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not going to get that.
Yep.
So I don't know. You know, eventually I'll pick it up. But some of these newer Hall of Famers, you know, even Brett Favre, you know, and people like that, they want $100-200 for an autograph. So that's the only reason I haven't picked those guys up. But I've got most of the big names for the old days.
Yeah, amazing. Orlando, thank you for sharing your collection with me. Do you want to jump into some lightning round here of Cuban baseball players?
Let's do it.
There have been 6 Hall of Famers and baseball players from Cuba, born in Cuba in history. How many of them can you name?
Minoso, Tony Perez, Tony Oliva.
Those are the 3 easy ones, right? And then it gets hard, really hard. I'd never heard of the next 3.
It gets tough. God, I think you got me on that. I have a list. I have a Cuban collector that sent me the whole list of who I should go for. Let me think.
I had never heard of it. These are all from the Negro Leagues and from the Cuban leagues.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Now I'm thinking of Cuban Hall of Famers. It's not old ones, huh? It's not Rafael Almeida. It's got to be, shoot. I don't know. I'm stumped. I guess I'm stumped on this.
Cristobal Torriante.
Cristobal Torriente, yes. He's a Negro Leaguer, Cuban Negro Leaguer. That's right. Torriente. It's Torriente.
Torriente. Martin Dihigo.
Oh, God. How could I forget Martin Dihigo? That was embarrassing. Martin Dihigo is probably the greatest Cuban player ever in the history of Cuba. He was a 5-tool player, including pitcher. And I can't believe I forgot Martin Dihigo. Martin, actually, how you pronounce it is Martin Digo. You don't pronounce the H in Cuba. It's Digo.
Okay.
They say Dihigo, but in Cuba, you don't pronounce the H, but Martin Dihigo.
And then Jose Mendez.
And Jose Mendez, another one of the Cuban Negro Leaguers that was a huge, huge star in Cuba. Yeah, those are Negro League stars that were voted in, you know, now when all the Negro Leaguers were voted in. But yes, those are, I mean, incredible Cuban players. If you look back in the history of Cuba, And if you look at that back, I mean, these guys played with Josh Gibson, with Satchel Paige, with all those players. And I think, I'm not sure if it was either Satchel or one of the players, old-time players, said that the best player that they'd ever seen was Martin de Eagle.
That's awesome. Never heard of any of those three guys. So you're familiar with the stat WAR?
Yes.
At least, yeah. Who leads all Cuban-born players in career WAR? It's a pretty tough one, I think.
I'd never looked that up, but all Cuban players in the stat WAR, not necessarily Hall of Famer, right?
Not a Hall of Famer.
I don't know. I'd have to lean towards my one of my favorites is Canseco. No, huh?
Rafi Palmeiro.
Rafi Palmeiro, 3,000 hits, 500 home runs. Yeah.
Should be in the Hall.
Yeah, he won't go in the Hall unless Bonds and Canseco and McGuire and Clemens, because that's the whole group of them. And, you know, I like Palmeiro, but I was not happy that he lied.
Yeah.
You know, at least Canseco admitted it. You know? But Palmeiro really never admitted it, and he did it.
All-time most WAR Cuban-born pitcher, also not in the Hall of Fame, but should be, in my opinion.
Well, you're killing me on the Cuban players, and I should know this, but I'm not too much with the stats. Cuban pitcher with the highest WAR.
Great wind-up.
I'm going to lean towards. Now Marichel's not Cuban, so I've
Puerto Rican, right?
I've got to go with Tiant.
You got it.
Yeah, I figured Luis Tiant.
I think Tiant will get in.
I don't know. It's tough. I don't know what his WAR is. I'm not real sure.
66.
You know, he's got a good possibility.
Yeah.
I think he's a great pitcher. Yeah. People forget about him. You know, he was very similar to Fernando Valenzuela.
Yeah. Valenzuela didn't pitch long enough, but man, what a career.
Yeah.
Orlando, that's it. You're off the hot seat.
I didn't do very well. I should do better with the Cuban players.
Oh no, you did great. It's tough. It's never as easy as you think it's going to be. Like I asked Ty about Kansas City Royals players, and they were tough. They were players I'd never even heard of before. And I grew up watching baseball. There was a lot of 80s guys, and I don't know, it's just weird questions that you think you're going to get, and then you get stumped.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking Negro League players at that time, but you're completely right. And Diego, I should have always remembered him.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time and your generosity sharing your collection with us. It's awesome to see. And I can't wait to meet you in person at the National in about 10 days.
For sure. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Orlando. Everybody, comment what your favorite card is that Orlando shared here. And I'll be having on some others in the near future, hopefully. Thanks, everybody.